and Indian economist Dr. Nilanjan Banik joins us from Hyderabad. Dr. Banik, welcome to DD India News App. Now, I have a set of 3 questions for you. First, could you talk a bit more, if you will, about the data from the Periodic Labour Force Survey, which indicates improvements in quantity and quality of employment in India?
Yes, because every year what is happening, Ramesh, is we have around 15 million people who join the labor force. And because the economy is doing well, what we see is most part of the laborers who are coming to the market are getting absorbed. Now, if you again look into our unemployment rate, which is below 8%, which kind of showcase that Indian economy is doing well. And other parameters is, if you look into the Purchasing Manager Index or the PMI index, both for the services as well for the manufacturing sector, you will find that this is actually nearing 60. Now, PMI index, the way the index is calculated, it takes into account the new orders, it takes into account the employment scenario, it takes into account that whether the capacity utilization in the manufacturing sector is increasing or not. And if it is more than 50, it is considered that the economy is expanding. Now, for India, what we see is both for services as well as for manufacturing, the PMI index is right now hovering around 57, 58 as we speak, which also showcases that Indian economy is doing well. In addition to that, if you look into the corporate tax collection for the fiscal 2022-23, almost 1 trillion Indian rupees was collected in the form of corporate tax, which is part of direct tax. If we are talking about the GST, the collection went as high as 1.8 trillion Indian rupees. For income tax and as well as corporate tax, both taken together, it is 1.9 trillion Indian rupees. So what this numbers tells you? This numbers tells you that the business is booming, and therefore you have so much of both direct and indirect tax collection. And in fact, if you see the October number for the GST tax collection, it is around 1.7 lakh crore rupees. And so in a way, the Indian economy is doing well. These are the broad parameters on the basis of which we can actually argue that the economy is resilient of what is happening elsewhere in the world.
Dr. Banik, so we've discussed about numbers or quantity. My second question to you refers to the issue of quality. And this might interest many viewers watching this broadcast. How is quality of employment measured?
So typically, if you ask an economist going by the classical school of economics, the quality is measured in terms of the wage rate that you are earning, right? Now, what is happening in the context of Indian economy is we are seeing a huge transformation from the unorganized sector coming into the garb of organized sector. Now, let me explain what does it mean. It means that more and more people are now becoming credit worthy. Now, each and every time you are making a payment through either GPay or PhonePe, what is basically happening is this money is actually coming to the banking system. So basically, even if you're a roadside seller or a small, running a small mom and pop store, what is basically happening is because you're paying them through this formal way of paying, you are actually building the credit worthiness of this small businessman, which was not the case, let's say, even 6 or 7 years back. So in that way, digitization is actually helping us and the Indian economy to grow at a faster pace. Because earlier what was happening is even though you're paying, that money was not getting counted, and that was outside the realm of GDP numbers. Now, because you are moving more from the informal to the formal sector, what we are seeing, and mind you, this process has just started to happen. And therefore, we assume that this growth, what you see right now happening, is going to continue and going to sustain in the future as well.
And finally, Dr. Banik, some of the discussion is also centered around different sets of data. For instance, IMF Executive Director K.V. Subramanian says in an interview to Indian news agency ANI that CMIE data is quote-unquote not reliable as compared to the periodic labor force survey. Just so viewers know, CMIE stands for Center for Monitoring Indian Economy. Your thoughts, Dr. Banik?
So basically what happens is the way you are collecting the data, because most of the way any private source, data source, like the one you mentioned, they collect the data is the sample size is smaller, but if you are talking about, let's say, PLFS or the NSSS type data, you have a much more broader population size, which means that in terms of robustness of what we say in terms of the data being collected, it is much more precise. So in that way, I go with the government data, which is collected over a period of time, not particularly with respect to a certain region, and more importantly, if you're collecting that data for a smaller period of time. Because if you're collecting data where the periodic interval is smaller, it is subjected to cyclical fluctuation, which may not be the case if we are trying to understand what is the long-term inherent trend in the data, which is there in the context of Indian economy, because the Indian economy is growing, and therefore one should look into a yearly or a long-term data as opposed to monthly or weekly data.
Dr. Nilanjan Banik, thank you for your time. Appreciate it.
Thank you.